Hello, my name is Rabbi Paysach Krohn, and I am so honored to be part of this program here at the Hidabrut building in Petach Tikva in Israel. This filming is actually being made during the 9 days in the year of 5777, Tovshanai Zion, 2017. And as we sit here this morning making this recording, it is just a few weeks after the Jewish world celebrated 50 years since Klal Yisrael was able to get back the Kotel HaMaravi, the Wailing Wall, the Western Wall. And of course, it's very special to every one of us in Klal Yisrael. But to my wife, who was a student here at that time, it was very, very special. She was in seminary, and the war broke out. Her parents, who lived in Denver, Colorado, wanted her to come back, but she did not want to leave Israel at that time of crisis. And she was very fortunate to be here during that time, and she was among those thousands that walked to the Kotel on Shavuos, when it was really open to the public for the very first time. It was so emotional. So many people were crying when they saw the wall and touched it and kissed it. But they tell a story about one of the soldiers who was able to be from the first group that broke through. And this soldier was not actually religious. And when he saw the wall, he started crying. He was so emotional. And some other soldier, he realized this fellow is not religious. He doesn't really understand what the Kosel represented to Klal Yisrael. So he said to him in Hebrew, Lama ta bocheh? Why are you crying? And his answer was fabulous. He said, Ani bocheh, amash ani lo bocheh. I'm crying because I don't know what there is to cry about. In other words, he was crying. He knew that there was some great significance here, but he really didn't understand it. And that's really what I would like to talk about. What is the significance of the loss of the Beis HaMikdash? Why do we cry? Is it just a building? Is it just the gathering place where people got together? So many of you may know that there is a very big yeshiva in America. It's called Beis Medrash Gavoa. It's located in Lakewood, New Jersey. And the one who started that yeshiva was a great Talmid Chacham, a great tzaddik. His name was Rabbi Aaron Kotler. And he once addressed this question. And he said, for us to appreciate what is missing, we have to learn a Tosfos. Tosfos is one of the commentaries in the Gemara in Bava Basra. And the Gemara in Bava Basra, Daf Chof Aleph, Amud Aleph, 21a, tells us a famous pasuk that we all know. As a matter of fact, a famous song was made out of it. Ki mitzion teitzei seira. That's a pasuk in Yeshaya Beis, pasuk Gimel. The simple meaning is, from Tzion, from the land of Zion, that's where Torah emanates. And what Tosfos mentions over there, what was it so special that makes it that so much Torah came out of Tzion? And Tosfos writes, L'fi shahaya roya kedusha gedola, because people would come to Yerushalayim and they would see the holiness, v'koyanim oiskim b'avoda. When they would come to the Beis HaMikdash, they would see how the priests, the high priests, and all the kohanim, they did the work, hayamechaven liba yoser li Yerushalayim v'lim Torah. In other words, it was the great people who worked in the Beis HaMikdash, the kohanim. They were so inspirational to all the people. And that's what the loss of the Beis HaMikdash is all about. It's not just a building, but it was that place where people were so dedicated to Hashem that anybody who saw them was inspired to do mitzvahs, to daven better, and to learn more. And then Tosfos writes, they saw how everybody in the Beis HaMikdash was involved in serving Hashem. And then through that, then they would have more intent, and they would study Torah to a greater level, and they would do mitzvahs with a greater enthusiasm. And then Rabbi Aaron continues. He writes, we see from here, Hareza Odam Atzmai Migdash Ma'at. Every person can really be a Migdash, a sanctuary. And he writes that there were people who used to go to the place where the Vilna Gaon davened in Vilna, and they would watch him pray. and it would affect how they prayed for years afterwards. And when I heard this expression that every person, every one of us, is a walking, talking Beis HaMikdash, I remembered that the Malbim, one of the great commentators on the Torah, tells us in the Parsha of Truma, where Hashem says to Moshe Rabbeinu, V'asu li migdash, let them make for me a sanctuary, v'shachanti b'seicham, and I will rest in them. Now, many commentaries ask the question, as the Malbim does, it should have said, V'asu li migdash, I will make a sanctuary, v'shachanti b'seichai. Let them make me a sanctuary and I will dwell there. That'll be my home. But it says, v'shachanti b'seicham, I will rest in them. Who's them? And the answer is, what he says is, I will rest in the people. When there's a Beis HaMikdash, every person, it can be so inspired that they alone are a Migdash Ma'at. And listen to what he writes. Shekol echad yivna loy migdash b'chadrei levavai. Every person should build a Migdash in the chambers of his heart. And that would be the dwelling place for Hashem. And then he says something amazing. He says, you know, your head has the brain in it. And the brain is where the Torah is observed, or absorbed, I should say. And he says that's like the Aron. The Aron Kodesh held within it the Shnei Luchot HaBrit, the Ten Commandments. So the Aron held the Torah. Our head is like the Aron that holds the Torah. Now, then he goes on to say that we know that we had the Lechem Aponim, those breads that were put on Friday, and they lasted a whole week. Now, we know that you cannot exist without bread. A person can't exist without the food, especially bread. So that's the lave, that's the heart. In other words, just like a person can't exist without a heart, can't exist without food. So the head is the Aron. The heart is the Lechem Aponim. And the Mizbeach is the stomach. Just like the Mizbeach consumed the carbonates, the sacrifices that were brought on the Beis HaMikdash, our bodies, I should say, our stomachs, absorb the food, and that's where it gets digested. Now imagine, think about it. If you would understand that your head is the Aron, your heart is the Lechem Aponim, and your stomach is the Mizbeach, oh my goodness, you would act so totally different, because you're a walking, talking Migdash Ma'at. And that's what I think. Then when we are talking about hoping to rebuild the third Beis HaMikdash, I think that first we have to become a walking, talking Beis HaMikdash. And if we realize that our head is the Aron, then the thoughts that we have, we're going to be much more careful about what we think about. And certainly, we're going to be more sensitive to what our heart feels about other people. Because after all, this is the Lechem Aponim. And certainly we'll be more observant in kashrut, in the things that we eat, because after all, this is a mizbeach. And all of a sudden, when we look at the Malbim and we look at what Rabbi Aaron tells us, we realize the potential in each and every one of us. Of course, we want to have a Beis HaMikdash, and we want to see the great people of Yerushalayim. But we have to remember that each and every one of us can be and should be great. Again, with the Aron, with the Lechem Aponim, and with the Mizbeach. Just a few weeks ago, I had the great opportunity, and I give you all the blessing, everyone that's listening, I give you this blessing. You should be able to go with some of your grandchildren to Israel. Now, of course, if you live in Israel, so you're here already, that's wonderful. But for those of us who live in Chutz La'aretz, so we don't get a chance to come to Israel that often, but what my wife and I try to do is as our grandsons become bar mitzvah age, we try to bring them to Eretz Yisrael. And one of the things that we do all the time, besides the fun things, we went boating on the Kinneret, of course, and they went jeeping and all that kind of stuff, which is great fun. But more important, I had them meet the great people of Eretz Yisrael, the tzaddikim, and to go to speak to some of them. Now, I'm going to mention some names. They are very special to me. I feel very close to each and every one of these people. And when my grandchildren met them, I said to them in advance, prepare some questions that you're going to ask to these people. And they asked the same questions to all the tzaddikim that we went to. And the answers that each one gave stay with these grandchildren. And when they come back, as they did, that's all they're talking about, the great tzaddikim that they met. Now, for example, the Tolner Rebbe, Rabbi Weinberger in Yerushalayim, very special person. And for us, it's special because he speaks English. I believe he was born in Canada, so he was able to relate to the children in a very personal way. One of the other people, Rabbi Yitzchak Zilberstein, there's nobody that has a smile like Rabbi Yitzchak Zilberstein, who's absolutely the most wonderful, kind genius of a Talmud Chacham. He doesn't speak English, but his smile just connected to the children. And he gave them both a sefer as a bar mitzvah gift. So special. You could ask him about anything. The man is such a genius. He has a shiur that he gives for doctors once a month. And it's just beautiful. He's written many, many books, and many of them have been translated into English. And when you have the children and they shake his hand and they take a picture together with him and he wishes them well, you could only imagine what it was like to be in the presence of those people who worked in the Beis HaMikdash. There was another person, Rav Shalom Schechter, again, an American fellow who has a yeshiva in Yerushalayim. And there was another person, Rav Pinchas Breuer, who comes from England that speaks the King's English or the Queen's English, and also warm, wonderful people. So these are all very special people. Rav Gamliel Rabinovitz, who was a Makubal, and one of the other people that we went to was Rav Avrom Erlanger. Again, these are people, and when you come to Eretz Yisrael, those of you who are watching outside Eretz Yisrael, don't make the mistake of just going to the restaurants and just going to the buildings. Of course, Yad Vashem is important. And of course, so many other places are important to see. No question, the museums, Beis HaTfutzot, that's great. But the real essence of Yerushalayim, the real essence of Eretz Yisrael is the holy people. That's what Rabbi Aaron was telling us. That's what the Beis HaMikdash was all about. And that's what we're missing. Because if we have these great people today, imagine what they were in the time of the Beis HaMikdash. And that's what we have to strive for. How do we strive for that? By us becoming great. And when we become great, then we want to meet even those people that are greater than us. But I want to share with you something that I think is just so important. You know, the Talmud tells us that one of the frightening things why the second Beis HaMikdash was destroyed, and this is in Yuma Daf Tesamad Beis 9b, Migdash Sheni Shehayu Oiskin B'Torah. There were many people that studied Torah and they did mitzvahs, but they did favors as well. But what did they do? They didn't love each other really the way they were supposed to. There was sinas chinam, and because there was hatred, baseless hatred, unfortunately, that's why the Beis HaMikdash was destroyed. And I think that there's a way, really, that we could all train ourselves to love Jews, all kinds of Jews. It doesn't make a difference, the level of religiosity of one person to another. Of course, we want everybody to be religious, and we want them to be committed. But, you know, they may not have the parents that you had, or they may not have the opportunities that you had. They may not have those mentors that inspired them. And so, therefore, it's not a question of hating them, just the opposite. Feel bad for them. Go out and reach them. And I'll tell you the truth, that's what I love about Hidabrut. Hidabrut is an organization that brings everyone into the fold. My dear friend, Chaim, just gave me a tour together with Erez and with the wonderful people of here in Hidabrut. I tell you the truth, I was amazed. I used to think Hidabrut was just lectures. But you come up in this building and you see that's what they're doing. They're loving all kinds of Jews. Jews that were stuck with Arabs. So, you know, a person would say, hey, these girls are stuck, you know, that's their choice. They made that choice. Forget about it. No, we're going to go out. We're going to save them. We're going to bring them back. And we're going to save the babies. Some of these women, unfortunately, became pregnant and they're embarrassed and they want to have an abortion. No, Hidabrut's going to save these kids. And then these kids can become great. They can become wonderful Jews that will become a walking, talking Beis HaMikdash, an Aron, a Lechem Aponim, and a Mizbeach. That's what it's all about. So I would suggest that we should do from this day on that you are listening to this, no matter where you are in the world, listen to what the Chavetz Chaim tells us. In Abbas Chesed Perik Yud Beis, Uma'oid, he writes, it's so important. Tzorech lizoy shela yechselay midas hachesed afilu yom echad mechayav. From today on, do not miss any day of not doing a chesed for somebody else. And he says you should be learning something. Men and women, every day you got to learn something. Now, of course, the women are not going to learn Gemara, but they can learn halacha, they can learn musa, they can learn halachas, and there's so much that women have to know as well. So every man and woman should learn every day, and every day you should do a chesed. And you know what the Chavetz Chaim says? I'll tell you something, it's frightening. I would never be able to say that, but he said it. And he says if somebody's just learning Torah, and he's not doing chasodim, he's not doing favors, when he needs a favor from Hashem, it's not going to be there. Because Hashem wants you to care for other people. It's Also, learning is so important, but it's not the only thing. You've got to do favors because we all need Hashem's favors. And that's how you get Avas Yisrael. That's how you get Avas Chinam. I'll tell you something very interesting. I just got involved with a program. You know, it's a couple days before Tisha B'Av, but right after Tisha B'Av, there's a day that's called Tu Tesvav B'Av, the 15th day of Av. Many people around the world are going to get together at the same time, and it's going to be orchestrated so that they try to do it at the same time. They're going to pray for those people who need shidduchim. What a beautiful thing. Even if you yourself don't need a shidduch, make sure that you find out where they are going to be praying, and you could pray in your own house and say those chapters of Tehillim. You know what that means? That you care for somebody. You're davening for somebody. And of course, if you need a shidduch, what a beautiful thing. You're davening for somebody else. And we all know the Chazal that teaches us if you daven for somebody else, then Hashem's going to help you. I would say the chapters Kuf Chav Zayin and Kuf Chav Ches, 127 and 128 are the most important because that talks about family. And that talks about children. And that talks about marriage. And that's what I would say. We've got to do favors every day. I just want to give you a small example. I have a friend where I live in my neighborhood of Kew Gardens, New York. There's a fellow comes from England. His name is Nigel Collins. I guess only a guy from England could have a name like Nigel. But he's a wonderful, wonderful guy, and he's a very talented photographer. So here's the thing that he did on Purim in our synagogue. In our synagogue, I'm not the rabbi there. I just daven there like everybody else. And they have what's known as Beis Medrash of Mordechai HaTzadik, which means that on the Purim day, let's say Mincha's at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, 1 o'clock, many of the fathers and grandfathers come together with the little boys, and they study with them, and they're all dressed up in their costumes, all the kids are. And then after they learn for about an hour, and some kids are learning together, so they daven Mincha, and then they go to the rabbi who sits up front, and he gives out money for Purim. That's beautiful. What does Nigel do? Nobody asked him to do this. But being that he's a good photographer, he stood there right by the rabbi, and he took pictures of every child getting money from the rabbi. And by the time everybody was ready to have their Su'udat Purim later in the afternoon, they already had an email of their child in the costume getting money from the rabbi. Nobody asked him to do it, but that's Avas Chinam. You think he knows every single kid in the shul? You know, some he knows, some he doesn't know. But it makes no difference. He got the email addresses of the parents. And that's what Avas Yisrael is all about. Doing favors for everyone. You know, I just want to end just with this thought. You know, the Gemara tells us that terrible, terrible story of Kamsa bar Kamsa. We all know that famous story about the fellow who made a party. And he liked Kamsa, and bar Kamsa came by mistake. And what happened? What happened? The Gemara is very open about what happened. The host says he's going to throw him out. And bar Kamsa, please don't embarrass me. I'll pay for my meal. Get out, he said. I don't want you here. And what happens? He says, get out. He says, I'll pay for half the meal. I'll pay for everybody. I'll pay the whole party. Please don't embarrass me. And the guy said, get out. The Talmud tells us, the Gemara tells us, frightening. The Gemara in Gittin und Vov. The rabbi stood there. They didn't stand up for him. This guy was getting embarrassed. And the rabbis didn't do anything. They should have. They were criticized. Where's the Avos Yisrael? Where's the care? This guy's being humiliated. He made a mistake. He came to a party that he wasn't supposed to be there. Defend him. Stand up for him. So what if you don't know him? So what if the host doesn't like him? But he's a Jew. You got to help him. And they didn't. And the guy got very angry. He made a whole plan. And he made a plan, and he went to a Gentile governor, and he said, bring a sacrifice, and you'll see the Jews won't accept it. And if you want to know the whole story, you'll read it in Gittin. But that was the beginning of the end. Kamsa or bar Kamsa Charav Yishalayim. Yishalayim was destroyed because of the hatred that host had to bar Kamsa, the embarrassment, and the fact that the rabbis didn't stand up for him. Let's try to change. Rabbi Isai, we've been suffering so long. You know, I don't have to tell you, every day we hear these terrible terrorist attacks. When is it going to end? It never ends. It's never going to end until Mashiach comes. How's Mashiach going to come? How's Hashem going to change his mind, so to speak, and want to bring the Beis HaMikdash? He's got to see that we care. If we care and if we do chesed, Hashem's going to do the greatest chesed for us. He's going to see that we love each other. He will love us in turn and bring Mashiach and then bring back the Beis HaMikdash. We can do it. We just have to be determined. I beg all of you, let's love each other, care for each other, and we'll dance together with the coming of Mashiach.